welcome back to the class. We were continuing with the economic policies and how which sections of people were affected and how it contributed to the growth of nationalism. So earlier we have studied about the peasants. So now let us see how the artisans and craftsmen got affected and how they became later unified so that that unity of these people contributed to nationalism. So the British economic policies were against the interests of Indian trade and industry. So the Britishers, whatever policies they made, all such policies were always benefiting the English companies or the companies in or the industries in England. When you compare with industrial industries in England and India, Indian industries are more cottage oriented, handmade industries. So these kind of industries were more in India. But Britishers, at the interest of their machine-made industries or their machine industries at England, they have taken away all the resources. So by which the Indian trade and industry got seriously affected. The English East India Company used its political power to destroy Indian handicrafts and industry. So what do you mean by this sentence? East India Company used its political power. So East India Company, when it was controlling Indian affairs, it politically involved with affairs of the kingdoms. They have replaced the kings. They have even directly conquered the kingdoms. Many such things they have done. When they became masters of politics of India, they could easily evade or they could easily avoid paying taxes, and as puppet rulers are kept by them, those puppet rulers never questioned these Britishers. So this East India Company, they did trade without taxes and earned huge benefits and profits. And with that profits, they didn't even focus on what are the problems of Indian traders or Indian, what do you call, people. Because of which Indian handicrafts and industry got ruined. Politically, when the local cottage industries lost support of the kings, because the kings were politically weak, they were made weak by Britishers. When kings were made weak, naturally political power was with Britishers. So they started deciding the policies, and then they have finally ruined this cottage industries by increasing huge amount of taxes, by not paying taxes and importing all their finished goods to India. India became a source of raw materials for the industries of Britain and a market for its finished products. So the Britishers have taken away majority of resources from India, and using these resources, they started developing their industries in England. And once they made goods with their machines, they are called finished products. That means with any resource, if anything is made, that is called finished product. Suppose cotton is a resource, and with it cotton clothes they will make. That is a finished product. So what the Britishers have done is they have taken away all the resources from here. With that, they made some products there in England with machine, and as they are making with machines, they are made at a very cheap. They can be sold at a very cheap price. So they dumped Indian market with cheap finished products, with which our quality handloom projects or handmade products could not compete. So this policy crippled the artisans and the craftsmen as they were devoid of their sources of livelihood. So here the sentence says that majorly the sources of livelihood for artisans and craftsmen. Who are artisans? People who make objects with hands, who are very skilled in making objects with hands. And craftsmen, similarly, there are also people who makes different kinds of objects and all. So here, as these handloom industries and other industries were ruined, the artisans and craftsmen, they could not survive, they could not face the ready-made products or finished products that are imported from England. The handmade objects could not compete with the British finished products. Hence, they lost their livelihood. Naturally, when they lose their livelihood, they come together and they wanted to get back their livelihood from Britishers. So you can understand that how these sections have got conscious of their exploitation and involved in national movement in later part. So coming to the other group of people called working class. So this class was a very new to, or it was very new to Indian society. So the growth of modern industries led to the birth of new social class in India. So many new industries took birth. See, it is not about the new industries, but modern industries. You can imagine, like, suppose if the British started some kind of, they started, they asking for, indigo cultivation and all such things. So several indigo factories were set up where, they used to make the dye, and also, these brick making industries. Earlier, they used to make in brick kilns. Now they started making it in a factory manner. So these are all the Britishers have done little modernization of Indian industries, but very negligible. They are not very advanced, or they are not only for the purpose of British. They have brought that little modernization. So when that little modernization happened, certain people got jobs in that industries. So which led to birth of new social class, and they're called working class. So like you can imagine between the owner and the worker, so there are some people in between them. So these people generally, these labor or the factory people or the working class, they were generally exploited by factory owners. You can even those days, because of the farming became very difficult because of high land revenue and all. Some farmers even turned as these kind of factory workers in those days. So because of turning off certain class people into this kind of things, a new working class has emerged. And these people were exploited by factory owners. So how they are exploited? They make them work for many long hours, and later they pay very small amount of salaries. See, any profession you take agriculture or other thing, they never get salary every month. It is all seasonal based. But now these workers were paid some salaries, and every month they used to get some kind, or daily they used to be paid wages, which India has experienced a very newly. So these workers felt little bit happy because they are getting regular wages, but they didn't understood that they were working overtime and they were being exploited. And see, the Englishmen generally used to be the factory owners. So never an Indian is allowed to set up a factory and all, but generally Englishmen, they used to be factory owners, and all the workers will be from India. So these workers were made work for longer hours, and they were given less wages or salaries. But a regular salary taking class has emerged in India. Although they formed a small section of population, they represented a new social outlook. So socially, these people could get regular incomes. In society, they had seen a kind of status. Because, see, if you take a farmer, he never gets a regular income kind of things. Whenever he plants a crop till it harvests, don't know whether he'll get money or not. So many such regular incomes won't be there for farmers. But this working class who are sent to work in factories set up by British, they got some regular salaries. So they developed a new social outlook. They enjoyed a different status in society compared to farmers, as well as between the owners and these kind of farmers or other laborers. These working class has emerged in a different way. Their outlook and interests were very broad, covering whole of India. So though their factories were located in the cities, all these so what happened, these people, laborers, working class, they used to migrate to city, and because the factories were generally set up in cities, so they left villages and they went to cities, started working there. So even in modern days, you can see the building workers, they'll be traveling to cities and working there. I know they have a separate set of outlook. That means they have a different exposure. They know what is happening. So they had some kind of consciousness what is happening around them. Because of regular incomes, their lifestyle become little bit good, so that they started understanding what is society and other things. So all these factors made their political thinking far more significant than the numerical strength. So even though this working class was very less compared to the other professionals in India, politically their thoughts were very significant. That means they understood what was the political things going on during the rule of British. See, whenever you get regular incomes and all, what happens financially, you get a stability. When you get financial stability, then the way, the perspective that you have towards society will change. Same thing these workers have experienced. So they started understanding certain modern things, what the Britishers were introducing. They purchased some modern clothes, they used some modern things. So their outlook was changing. Their political ideology also changed. They understood what politically was happening, and later they could also contribute to nationalism because this working class had seen the impact of they could finally understand how they were exploited, and so they have finally you know also contributed their thing to the nationalism. So the role of educated Indians. See, some Indians, they who were like they had a chance to go to have English education. Some of them went even England. They had a good education there. They practiced barrister. Many such things they have done. So they got a good English education. How these educated Indians have contributed for nationalism, for the growth of nationalism, that we will see. The only employment available to educated Indians was government service, in which competition was high and chances of promotions were bleak. So, educated Indians, especially English educated Indians, they had only one kind of employment. They can't do farming, they can't do artisan work and all. The only employment they had was involved in the government service. So to enter into government service, they had to write many competitive exams. So during those days, Indians had to face a very high and tough competition because of, see, they are still the learners compared to English people. They were still getting the education and all very new. Still some of the intelligent Indians could match with the English men, and they competed with them in English, many competitive exams for government service. Even though they competed for government exams and get into that, the chances of promotions were bleak. That means then Indians were never given high positions in government. That means the promotions were always, they were limited to a very petty small posts. They had hoped that British capitalism would help to develop India's productive forces as it had done for Britain. So these educated Indians, they felt that the capitalism, what do you mean by capitalism? So setting up of factories, making huge production, getting more profits. So this kind of mechanism was very interesting for these Indians who were educated. And these Indians felt that maybe the Britain would help India to also progress towards industrial sector because England was the first, industrialized country. Industrial revolution has seen in that country. So educated Indians felt that as England is progressing in its industrial sector, if it allows even England people to, stay here, then they may help India's productive forces so to also get promoted. Like how they developed Britain, they felt that they may also develop England. Instead, they found that the British policies are keeping India economically backward. The educated Indians felt that because of the capitalistic approach of Britain, they succeeded in England. They could industrialize England very nicely. They thought same thing would happen even in India. But the British policies made India economically backward. This the educated Indians realized. Thus, all sections of society, they felt that their economic salvation lay in freeing themselves from the British rule. So once artisans, craftsmen, peasants, and this Many people, many sections, when they realized that economically if they want to be empowered, then the only way to that is free themselves from British rule. Understood? So until and unless the British leave India, no way India can economically progress. This was realized by all the sections. Just now we have spoken about artisans, craftsmen, right? And peasants, the working class. These all groups were economically exploited. And later they realized that until British leave India, India can never become economically powerful. So, on this ground, that is economically to be strong, Indian people had to come together on a national platform. So, finally, people have understood the objective that to strengthen themselves economically and to get away with the economic exploitation of British, they have to come together and they have to create a national platform. That means they need an association nationwide to fight against this kind of policies. In this process, the spirit of nationalism received a powerful stimulus. So every section who got affected economically, they were craving for to revive their economical status. So in that mode, they started coming together. They started understanding the importance of nationalism. So they could that nationalism received powerful stimulus. That means it received a boost so that they can revive their economical status. So to revive their economical status, everybody had a common conscience that they must send the British away from India. In that mechanism, this oneness or unity, or you call it as nationalism, this kind of things slowly started progressing. So how this repressive colonial policies, what do you mean by repressive colonial policies? So the policies which create a very negative impact or a very kind of what do you call a backwardness for our country, that kind of policies are called repressive colonial policy. The policies which create backwardness to our progress or economic growth or whatever you call, such policies are called repressive colonial policies. So the nature of British colonial rule over India helped growth of national sentiment among Indians. So the kind of rule they adopted, they were never friendly with Indians, first of all. They were always trying to suppress Indians. They always wanted to loot Indians. You can look at the mentality of the British. If they are really want to rule this country, they can also rule in another way. Like Mughals, they can rule in a friendly manner. But what these people did, they started applying very harsh policies towards Indians. That harsh policies itself, it created national sentiment. They started feeling, Indians started feeling that who are these outsiders? Why did they came to us and they started making us suffer like this? This is a time to come, this is a time to fight against these outsiders. So till before that, never they had such feeling. But now they started feeling, yes, we all should be one and so that we can drive these Britishers out. And the Britishers had conquered India to promote their own interests and therefore followed such repressive policies so as to make India subservient to the needs of Britain. So that is, the British have conquered India, right? They came as traders. Later, they involved politically in the affairs of India to promote their own interests. Like, see, they wanted to earn huge profits. To earn huge profits, they wanted to evade taxes. So, to evade taxes, they have to take political control. So, what they did, they took political control by wars, by applying subsidiary alliance, many such things. So, those were their own interests, and therefore followed such repressive policies. So, to promote their own interests, the British have followed repressive policies. And also, not only policies, they also made India subservient to the needs of Britain. So whatever the British industrial sector needs, understood? Any industry requires raw materials. So the Britishers understood that India is a very good colony for them to have those raw materials. So what they have done, they made India as a source colony for all these kind of resource materials required in Britain, which is like, for their needs, they're exploiting here, which is very simple. These policies became the major barrier to India's economic, social, cultural, intellectual, and political development. You take any sector, economic sector exploited. Socially, they interfered with the affairs of India. Culturally, they disturbed. They didn't respect the sentiments. Intellectual and politically also, they never allowed Indians to rise to power. So, which created a major barrier. So that means the policies have interfered with economic aspects. Economically, they looted. Socially, the policies have interfered with Indian affairs. Culturally, they didn't respect the policies, didn't respect the sentiments of Indians. Politically, they didn't give any importance to India. So they made Indian political system weak, more and more weak, by making the rulers, fight among themselves, dividing them and ruling them. So many such things they have done. So the policies have a very important role in building nationalism. Some of these repressive policies, especially those followed by Lord Lytton. So he was Viceroy of India from 1876 to 1880. He acted as a catalyst for the growth of nationalist movement in India. So Lord Lytton, his repressive policies, okay, were major in turning people to build their national sentiment very fastly. He acted as a catalyst, Lord Lytton. His policies were very tough. And let us see what are those policies one by one and how they contributed to nationalism. So, Lord Lytton, he organized a Grand Delhi Darbar in 1877 to proclaim Queen Victoria as Empress of India. Lakhs of rupees were spent on the event, but nothing was done for Indians who were in the grip of famine. So we said that Lord Lytton, he was a catalyst in promoting national sentiment among Indians. How he acted as a catalyst? His policies. For example, when when British Queen took over the control of India, they also proclaimed, the Britishers have also proclaimed that Queen Victoria, okay, who was the Queen of England, Queen Victoria also as an Empress of India. That means she was officially declared by Britishers as the Queen of India also. As India became their colony, they considered even Queen Victoria, the then Queen of England, as Empress of India. Okay, well and good, they have declared her as, because they are the masters, political masters, so they have declared their queen as our queen, which is fine. But this man, Lord Lytton, what he did to celebrate that event, he spent lakhs of rupees on the event. You can see here in the picture, a grand Delhi Darbar was organized where all the people were invited. Lakhs of rupees was spent, and just to proclaim that Queen Victoria is our queen from now. She is our greatest queen. Just to proclaim such things, why do you need such a grand party kind of thing? He organized such a grand darbar where many people turned out, lakhs of rupees were spent. At the same time, Bengal was suffering from famine, other parts of India were suffering from famine. He was never, being a viceroy of this country, he was never bothered about the people who were suffering with famines. Due to failure of rains, famines were there, people were dying. He was never bothered. He was busy with such waste darbars at Delhi. Lord Lytton introduced the Vernacular Press Act and Indian Arms Act also. So these two are very important. One thing is Grand Indian, Darbar at Delhi. Second thing is Vernacular Press Act and Indian Arms Act. So what are these acts? We will see. So first let us see the Vernacular Press Act. So according to this act, vernacular papers to publish in any material that might excite feelings of dissatisfaction against British government. So it forbade. What do you mean by vernacular? That means the newspapers which are being published in local languages. You take Bengal, the educated Indians were running some local language newspapers in their Bengali. You take Andhra, their own languages. They were running certain newspapers, Indians. Through that newspapers, they used to bring a lot of issues to British notice. But the Vernacular Press Act, which was made by Lord Lytton, it has forbade vernacular papers to publish any material that might excite feelings of dissatisfaction. So according to this act, no local language newspaper should write news which is against British, because he felt that these newspapers are injecting the ideology of national sentiment among people through these newspapers. So he wanted to stop that kind of awareness among people. So by bringing this Vernacular Press Act, he made a rule that no newspaper should publish any kind of news that creates dissatisfaction on British. So which is a kind of suppressive nature, right? So this act was not applicable to English newspapers. So English newspapers, they had complete freedom to write, whereas the local language or our native Indian newspapers were not allowed to write anything against British. So in 1882, this act was repealed by Lord Ripon. So in 1882, the act was repealed by Lord Ripon. So what do you mean by repealed here? It was cancelled because they have seen some kind of resistance from local newspapers and some educated Indians. So Lord Ripon, who was the later viceroy, he has removed that, or he has cancelled those act. So another important repressive policy adopted by Lord Lytton was Indian Arms Act of 1878. So Vernacular Press Act was one thing, then Indian Arms Act was another major repressive policy. See, according to this Indian Arms Act of 1878, it is criminal offense for Indians to carry arms without license. So the Britishers have made a law through this act called Indian Arms Act, by which no Indian can carry arms without license. So this act was not applicable to British. A Britisher who might be a resident in India or he might be an officer in India, he can carry any weapon or gun without any license, without any permission from government. Whereas an Indian who was who, to carry gun, he needs to take up license. So which is a which shows the partiality, right? So when they really wanted to make laws, they should the law should be equal to all, but only for Indians. According to this act, they cannot carry arms without the permission of British. That shows how insecure they are. And the maximum age limit for Indian civil service examination was reduced from 21 to 19 years. So the Lord Lytton, he also reduced the age to participate in civil service exam from 21 to 19 years. That is maximum age. Think, see, only the maximum age limit for Indian civil service was 21 earlier, but he reduced it to 19 years. Why? Because he does not want Indians to participate in this civil services exam so that they enter into higher jobs in British government. So they wanted to avoid Indians to entering into higher jobs in British government. So those days civil service exam was the highest exam, was the highest official competitive exam. So if they reduce the age limit to 19, almost I mean to the 19 years, then majority of them they can stop entering into that services. So it making it difficult for the Indians to compete for it. So I'll tell you one more thing here. They even changed the exam center. Only one exam center was there in India. Even that they have shifted to England. So those who wanted to write civil service exam, they have to go to England. Such kind of represent or repressive policy affected Indians a lot, and the import duties on British textiles was removed. So, Vernacular Act, Indian Arms Act, age limit in civil services, import duties on British textiles was removed. That means if any products come from England, no need to pay any taxes for local people here. They can directly dump their products here and keep it for sale so that they can earn more profits. And when these products gained more popularity because of their cheap prices, Indian cottage industry suffered. Such disastrous policies, such loss-giving policies to Indians were introduced by Lord Lytton and Sir C.P. Aylbert, the law member of Viceroy's Council, prepared a bill popularly known as Aylbert Bill in 1883. So this is a very another important bill. See, Lord Lytton was Viceroy, and in his council, okay, Viceroy's Council, there was a law member called Sir C.P. Aylbert. So Sir C.P. Aylbert, he prepared a bill called Aylbert Bill in 1883. So it was introduced by Viceroy Lord Ripon. Understood? So this is a peculiar case. This is not during Lord Lytton. This is during Lord Ripon. Ripon was always favorable to Indians. You may think that he was the person who removed the Vernacular Press Act also. So Sir C.P. Aylbert, the law member of Ripon's Viceroy's Council, introduced a bill called Aylbert Bill in 1883. So, according to this bill, it is to abolish judicial disqualification based on race distinctions. So, this needs some explanation here. The thing is, by this Aylbert Bill, Indian judges and magistrates were given power to what do you call like to interrogate or to give punishments to even criminals of British origin. Any British person, if he does a crime and if he is produced before an Indian judge or Indian magistrate, the Indian judge is eligible to give judgments on such people, even on England people. So this was the power given to Indians. In fact, this is a good thing, right? So they were even allowing Indians to trial criminals of British. See, maybe there are many British people living in India by that time. They might be committing some crimes. To interrogate those people, the judge, he needs certain those days Indians, they qualified some high exams and all. They were even judges in British government. So the British judges, sorry, the Indian judges were given power to have a trial on the crimes or the criminals belonging to British origin. This created a resentment among the British and they started a defense association to defend their special privileges. Once this bill was introduced, then immediately British people resented. They rejected this bill because how can racially inferior people like Indians could could interrogate Britishers who are their masters. So the Britishers, all the Britishers in India, they mostly outrightly rejected this bill. They thought this is, they're showing their racial superiority. They said, how can we, being their masters or their rulers, can be trialed by the Indian judges? They were not able to digest that Indian judges are giving judgments for them. So this reaction provoked counter-agitation by educated Indians. So when these people, the Britishers started saying that no, you cannot, uh, an Indian judge is not supposed to give any judgment on crimes committed by a Britisher, which they felt as a very superior, they call it a inferiority complex and all. When they said like that, immediately Indians said, no, no, this bill is very good for us. It brings equality for Indians. How can you say no for this? So Indians also started counter agitation to the British agitation. Government ultimately withdrew the bill and enacted a more moderate measure. So once Britishers started opposing this bill, and Indians started opposing the opposition of Britishers. When this opposing kind of ideas came up, and when there is a controversy over the bill, the government, the viceroy, withdrew the bill, and what he did, he came up with a moderate policy. That means which can be agreeable to both. So what is that? The power of trying Europeans to a sessions judge and district judge who might be an Indian. So he enacted a. So what he did was, in Albert Bill, there was a change made so that both parties can be happy. Now they cannot completely remove that. See, first they made the bill, gave power to Indian judges to interrogate even British criminals. Now, if they remove that, Indians will agitate, saying that you have given this and again you are taking back this. This is racial discrimination. They'll call like this, which the Britishers don't want to happen. And if they continue that, they get resistance from their own people. So they came up with a moderate decision. What was that moderate decision? If any British criminal has to be interrogated by a Indian judge, the criminal can ask for a 50 member, sorry, I mean, suppose the judge will not alone decide, right? He'll have another judges along with him. So these judges must be more than 50% of these judges must be Europeans. Then, so this was the change brought so that so they can expect that yes, in the jury means the judge and other judges will be there. Indian judge might be there. Whenever an Indian judge is interrogating a British criminal, he should also make sure that he should convince 50% judges in, I mean, he should bring 50% judges in his jury as I mean, judges from Europe or from Britain. So, so that the trial could be always, it's almost like a negligible decision, but this bill made it clear that Indians that justice and fair play could not be expected where the interests of European community were involved. See, this change in bill created again an unhappiness in Indians. Whatever, if a crime is done, whether it's an Indian judge or European judge, it must be done. But what is the problem for British people to be judged by an Indian judge? So what they did, they're asking for some British judges also to join with Indian judge. So naturally, if the judges are more than 50% in the jury, if British judges are more than 50% in the jury, do you think those British judges will allow that British criminal to be judged by Indian judge? No. So what they'll do, they'll try to save their people, the British judges. That's what they want finally. So which Indians didn't like finally. And these repressive policies of the British provided a stimulus to political agitation and quickened the pace of Indian nationalism. So all such policies politically also created a very progress, and people started getting united more and more to fight against these policies of British.